Welcome back to another episode of the Capes and Tights podcast right here on capesandtights.com. I'm your host, Justin Soderberg. Back for another episode is Fearless Fred Kennedy. He is the writer of comic books such as Dead Romans over at Image, which we talked about last time he was on the podcast on episode 107. But for this episode of the podcast, we talked to Fred talking about his fan-made Star Wars story, Mud79, available wherever podcasts are found. We talk Star Wars, we talk the actual podcast, the creating of the podcast, and so much more. Check out this episode with Fearless Fred Kennedy talking about Mud79, his fan-made Star Wars story audio drama. Enjoy, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast, Fearless Fred Kennedy. First of all, before we get started, how did the name Fearless? I meant to ask this last time. How did Fearless Fred Kennedy come about?
Oh, I hate Fearless Fred. I hate the name. I do, because it's like a goofy radio guy name.
Yes.
And it's so when I was growing up, when we moved to Canada from Belgium when I was 12, and I remember I didn't know anybody, didn't have any friends, and I loved listening to the radio. And I loved listening to the radio. And there was this one radio station, The Bear, which was like a rock station in the explosion of the grunge scene, like the late 80s, early 90s. And so they were riding the wave, and they were this amazing FM rock station that was independent, that did whatever they wanted. And I loved it. And I wanted to be on the radio because of that station so bad. And then I got into broadcasting, and I'd been working in these small little markets in the middle of nowhere, like on Cape Breton Island, and then in the Annapolis Valley, and then in Northern Ontario, and for years. And then I finally got an opportunity at a big station in Winnipeg. And it was this station called Power 97, which I'm syndicated on in the evening show there, which is kind of cool because that's where it all began. So I was the overnighter, and I would do overnights, and then the morning show would come in. And I was so desperate for the next opportunity that I would do whatever they asked me to do. And so I would go get them coffees. I would help them do their production. I would record. So I would record the late night TV shows for them. Bear in mind, this is the late 90s, early 2000s. So I'm recording the talk shows on TV on VHS. Then taking those VHSs and dubbing them into the computer and stripping audio while I'm on air. So I'm cutting audio for the morning show while I'm on the air, just doing whatever they need done, like to get audio for them so they have it in the show. And then they asked if I wanted to do some stuff with them to be like an on-the-street stunt boy. I'm like, oh, absolutely. So I became like this stunt boy that they would send out, like man in the street stuff. And so they would give me like a few things to do, and then I would just go out and I would bring them, like I would always bring them way more than they needed because I was so desperate, right? And I love that my shirt says sub, by the way. That's hilarious. Very funny. Anyways, I would bring them all this audio, and then they started calling me Fearless Fred because there was like nothing that I wouldn't do. And so one time I remember on Elvis's birthday, they had me dress up as Elvis, and you could come down and buy a donut to throw at me, and that money would go to the Humane Society. Like the one guy on the show was really big into animal welfare and dogs, and like super huge animal lover. And so all of the things that I ended up doing had this like charity bent to them, but like there was nothing I wouldn't do. So that's where Fearless came from. It was, I could get into some of the things that they had me do there's no way you could do that on the radio today without getting like sued or something. Yeah. So it was gonzo. But it was always to me. It was never, no one got punished but me. But me. So I always took the beatings for it, but it was good. It got me where I am today, you know?
I'm glad it doesn't say like when you write Dead Romans, it doesn't say like, like they put the last name only sometimes. It doesn't just say Fearless. That'd be great.
Oh. God, would that be? And the thing is that I've tried to shed this name for years, and every time they're like, no, it stands out. It stands out. It's like an old-fashioned radio name, and it's like, it is, but it's okay when you're in your 20s, but when you're in your 40s, everyone's like, so what makes you so fearless? Like, nothing. Like I'm fearful of hurting my back. Like I get worried if I'm laying down and have to sneeze. So I'm not fearless. I'm quite afraid of many things.
When I roll out of bed in the morning, I'm afraid to pull a muscle, so I got to make sure.
Yes. I got to stretch. I got to limber up. Yeah, I'm not afraid of stretching, so I'm fearless in that regard.
It was funny too because I think when you were on last time, like 2 or 3 episodes later, I had Dennis Hopeless on, the comic book
Yeah.
writer, and I had to ask him at the end of it too. I was like, "So how did that come about?" He goes, "That's less." Him and his now ex-wife got married, and when they got married, like on the marriage certificate it says what name do you
Yeah.
want to take afterwards. Like basically the terminology is which do you want to take your husband's name, so on and so forth. That was the original intent of it, but you literally could change it to anything. So like when you got married, you could write Fearless Fred as your name, and
Yeah.
no one says anything. It's just a legal free quote unquote way to change your name. And so they were like, oh, that's kind of cool, let's change our name to that. And then after they got separated and divorced, he tried to go back to Dennis Hallam, but no one knew who he was at that point. So he's now forced to use the name Hopeless
I
because of the
feel bad. Like that's amazing. I got to talk to him about that. If I ever our paths cross, I'm definitely bringing that up.
because he's like, yeah, now I have to go by Hopeless because no one knew who I was. And I was like, that makes sense because I mean he was well into his comics writing career and everybody
Yeah.
saw Dennis Hopeless and he was writing for Marvel a lot. So Marvel only puts the last names on the front for sure on every single one of their stuff, which always makes me laugh because when Rom V writes something from Marvel, it just literally says V on the front of
V. That's a cell. V. I am a letter. I own a letter.
We're gonna find out like 30 years from now that it's not actually Rom V, it's Rom 5.
Mm,
Yeah.
we've
And
been
we're all saying
wrong.
it wrong.
Yeah.
No, but that's fun. That's awesome. It makes sense. If you just had a name here's the all, you just didn't name yourself. That's a big thing
No,
too.
I
You
never
were like,
did. It was
oh,
given to me by this guy, Hal Anderson, who is like a Winnipeg broadcasting institution. He gave me the name. And I gotta be honest, when he gave me the name, it was the coolest thing ever.
yes.
Like I'm 22. I feel like I'm finally making it. I'm part of this show. And the thing is, like, I took beatings on the air and I took a beating on the air, like them
Yes.
making fun of me all the time. But when the mics are off, it's like they looked after me so well. Like they got me my first car. They helped me get more money. They helped
Yeah.
secure me get a contract. They got me off being a part-time hourly employee, getting salary. They opened the doors for me, and I wouldn't be where I am without my experience on that show. And two of the most giving dudes that I've ever worked for. And you always see that like when you're younger and then you get a bit of success, you start to get a bit of an ego.
Mm.
And they always were very quick to like keep me in check and be like, this is the job and it's a fantasy and it's not real. And you need to
Yes.
remember that it can all go away. And they would talk a lot about how people buy into their own hype and they buy
Mhm.
into this image of what they are. And it's like, this isn't your life. This is how you pay your bills. Like this is how you make a living. This isn't your life. And that separation of church and state, so to speak, was
Yeah.
very cool. And when you're young and you keep having it like reminded to you, it becomes sort of like your mantra. And who I am and what I do for a living are two very different things. And that's not my life. It's just how I make my living. And my experiences working with like seasoned veterans like
Mhm.
them had a profound impact on the way I approach what it is that I do, both and not just for radio. I often find that there's a lot of similarities between the radio world and the writing world. And that there are a lot of people that just buy into this image of what it is that they're doing versus
Mhm.
what is it that you're trying to do. It's like, I'm just trying to tell a story. I'm
Mhm.
not trying to be the coolest guy ever. And there's we've all, everybody who's been on the show floor has met people that are just obsessed with that like image of what it is that they're doing versus what it is that they're doing, you know?
Mhm.
If I was at a con, my ideal situation would be after I'm done on the floor, I can go into the room, I can shower, and I can just get on the keyboard again. Like that's
Yes.
what I would love to
Yes.
do. Like that'd be my favorite because the hotel, it's quiet, it's so chill, it'd be so
Yeah.
great. Love it, absolutely.
Well, at least the name Fearless came from a classic people. It wasn't this thing that like
Yeah,
some stupid college friend gave you or something like that. Like at least you have that
yeah,
story to
yeah,
tell behind it. So, and
totally.
also I noticed if you think about it, in the people who probably know you by Fearless Fred are really more of your radio broadcasting those fans
Yeah.
too. Like, so if someone stumbled upon Dead Romans, it just says Fred Kennedy in it. So it's not
Yes.
like
Oh, it's
that's
great.
you're Fred Kennedy in the comic book world. You're Fearless Fred when you speak on radio or podcasting or
Yeah.
things like that. So you have two
It's
different egos. You got to alter
yeah.
ego. You got to have like a cape when you go to cons and be like,
I
this
gotta
is Fred Kennedy.
which level of ego do I have right now? Let's decide. Let's
Which one is the more fun?
mm,
You know what I mean?
the
It's probably just Fred
comic.
Kennedy,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah, just me, just pure
Just
dad
you.
style.
Yes,
Just dad.
exactly.
I'm wearing my New Balance running shoes. I'm good to go.
There you go. I wear New Balance every day. You know what? I don't want to hear it. New Balance all the way. I don't
I
wear like
actually just tried. I tried getting. I just switched to
yeah.
Haka running shoes,
Mhm.
and I gotta say, I'm thoroughly impressed. Like we're talking dad comfort, like thoroughly impressed. It's good. It's a good shoe. Very
I'm
very light, very cushy.
I'm glad that they do make stylish shoes that are comfortable nowadays. Whereas I feel like our parents had to wear ugly stuff that was comfortable. There was no middle ground, and the same
Yeah,
thing goes for like I was putting on t-shirts the other day, and I was always been like a very top or tighter into a large, like should have probably been an extra large in some things. And I looked at my wife the other day and I put on an extra large. I'm like, see, it's all about comfort. Forget this whole style shit. Like I need it's comfortable. And she's like, oh my gosh. I was like, well, this is a large. It fits fine. And then I bought some shirts online. They were all larges and they were all I need to get extra larges. So comfort over style, in my opinion, nowadays. I'm
yeah,
37. I've got a 2-year-old. We're good to go.
absolutely. I do have a thing where if I'm wearing sweatpants, I can't have my wallet on me. And
Yes.
that's
Oh,
gotten me
yep.
into some trouble in the past.
Yep.
Sweatpants. They gotta have a back pocket now so I can put my wallet
Mm-hmm.
just in case I need it. You know?
Which you probably wouldn't even need if you just hold your phone with Apple Pay and stuff like that. You don't even need your wallet.
Yeah.
But so enough about being wearing dad pants and dad shoes. What's so I know you were on back on episode 107, and we talked obviously a lot about Dead Romans. We ended up, diverting a little bit and talking Star Wars because you came on right before we were doing Star Wars week here on the podcast, or right after, or right around there. But you have this podcast, Mud79. It's a scripted audio drama podcast. Is that what you call it?
Yeah, audio drama, radio play. I don't
Okay.
know what the appropriate term is. I say audio drama because it's the same way people say graphic novel. But to me, it's like it's a radio play. Like
Mhm.
in my head, it's a radio play. That's what it is. But audio drama has audio drama Sundays as a hashtag on
Yeah.
the social media. So that's the road I got to ride, you know?
Yes, exactly. And just so those listening or watching have this idea, so an audio drama podcast, differs slightly from both podcasting like
Yeah.
this, which is more internet interview based, or there is serialistic ones, but they're not. Like, there are podcasts that are just like My Favorite Murder, for an example, talks
Yeah.
weekly about specific things, but they're not what this is. It's just basically I hate to say it, but audio book that's dramatized more with sound
Yeah.
effects and different actors and
100%.
actresses and stuff like that. So there's a difference. And I do think that I didn't know what they were originally until Marvel did the one with Wolverine.
Mhm.
Wolverine, they did it with Stitcher, which, all right, rest in peace, Stitcher. But Stitcher, they did it with them, which was Wolverine the Long Night. And they ended up making it into a comic book afterwards, which was pretty cool too. Cause like I heard, like I was listening to Mud79 and I can picture in my head what these characters look like in my own mind. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you're picturing these things. And so then when they did the Wolverine thing, I did the same thing. Obviously, we know what Wolverine looks like, but like some of these other characters that were introduced, the small characters, the bit characters, I was like, I wonder what they look like. And in my mind, I have them. And then someone was able to actually illustrate them on page. And I almost found myself getting angry at certain pages, be like, that's not what they look like. I don't know what's wrong with this illustrator, but that's not what I had in here. And then I thought to myself, connecting it to this was exactly what people do in the Star Wars universe. When someone doesn't make a Star Wars movie that's the Star Wars movie that they want, they get pissed off at the screen that's not how Star Wars is supposed to go. We're like, no,
Yeah.
that is how Star Wars is supposed to go, because that's how that writer wrote it. But
Absolutely.
but an audio drama is more, like I said, has that sound effects in it, a little bit more, a few more people than just one person reading a book across in a more of a monotoned voice, which some audiobooks are getting to that too. I don't know if you heard of recent audiobooks where it's like the author of the book reading it, and they're using and there is some sound effects and music in the background, at least something, change in inflection in their voices or changing of tone and voices. Sometimes I've seen male and female actors are voice actors reading different parts and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
they are getting better at the audiobook and making it a little bit more entertaining, but not as entertaining as something like Mud79, which is like
Thank you.
immersive. Like I feel like I'm in the car and I'm like listening on blast driving down the highway, and I'm just like feeling like I'm being chased by people in the car. But before I get into you actually talking about this, that's like this ramble here is yesterday. When was it? Saturday or Friday night. My parents were in town, and I went to the gas station down the street from my house to grab something. And when I went inside, my car has my wife got this audio thing for my Apple Play, which is like a Bluetooth thing, but it instead of just Bluetoothing from my car, it Bluetooths to this thing, which acts like Apple. It's this weird thing. It's a cool thing, or Apple.
Yeah.
Is it Apple Play? CarPlay. And but the stupid thing about it is when you turn the car on, it automatically starts playing, which I hate. So it's like you're in the middle of a podcast and like I start the car in the morning to like run back inside and I come back in there and it's like 3 minutes have passed in the podcast. Well, I did the same thing, but if you walk away with the car running, it obviously Bluetooth disconnects. I go in the gas station, left the car running stupidly, come back out. I open the door and the podcast is playing so loud. Mud79 is being streamed across the entire gas station, and people are
That's advertising. That's what I need. That's what I need.
But they didn't know what it was. They just thought someone was being attacked. That's what.
Yeah, because there's a lot of that in it. Yeah.
So it was just kind of funny. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to like my phone's not connecting yet, and I'm trying to pause it, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, oh my god, people are gonna think I'm a nerd. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, it was just kind of funny. So it has that immersiveness to it, and honestly, one of the best places I think to listen to it is the car because it's got the subwoofers or the subwoofers, the bass and the almost soundproofing from outside and stuff like that. So yeah, long story to say that Mud79 is amazing. See you later, Fred.
Yeah, there we go. I designed it to listen to it in the car.
Okay, yeah,
that's like the way I engineered the sound. And when I say that, I know that sounds kind of trite, but I set up my speakers in my studio because I do audio production for radio as part of my job, and it was that skill set that sort of like got me into doing this. I set it up so that it could be listened to in the car ideally, and some people would listen to it on earbuds, and I feel like they're not getting everything because of the way that earbuds will sort of like filter sound for you and all that stuff. The layers of audio, because sometimes the production track is like 17 layers deep with ambient background noise and then background music and then the sound effects and stuff and all that. And I actually, when you bring up like audio books using music and stuff, I got the idea from when I was listening to the audiobooks for Heir to the Empire, and I was re-listening to those while I was driving, and then they've got the music, they got the Star Wars music, and then they got really light sound effects that are running through it, and there's parts of it, and then the narrator is doing the voices of all the characters, but sometimes and they're doing a great job, but sometimes the character voices that they're doing sound really bad. And so in my head, I'm like, why don't you just get someone else to do just that voice? And that was the idea with Mud79 was it's not a true radio play in the sense that it's just the dialogue with some exposition. It's a narration with a massive cast of more than 100 different people. And then a full cinematic soundscape in the background. So it's like a hybrid sort of in between of a true audio play and a true audio book. And that is what I wanted. And I wanted to be able to hold the hand of the person listening and bring them through everything. And it's because there's a lot of subtext and context about what's going on. And when you're dealing, so the story for anybody who hasn't heard it, it's like Platoon meets Star Wars. It is a story about a guy who, when he's 16 years old, joins the Imperial Army because his family all fought for the Republic in the Clone War, and for him, it's just a different flag. And he explains it's just a different flag, and that's his perspective going into things. Is very much like Platoon, where he's learning as he goes that what you volunteered for is very different than what you
Yes.
volunteered for. And it's told from this looking back with this level of cynicism of how stupid was I to believe all of this. But there's also a level of discontent with pulling the curtain back.
Yeah.
In my head, the guy who's writing it, the narrator Solomon Kwai, is dealing with the rise of the New Republic. So this is like 5 years after he's writing this book, like a few years after Endor, and how when you watched the first season of Mando, and he's like, "Is the galaxy better now? Is it better?" Like when he says that, and that idea, like I'd already been tinkering with the idea of doing Mud79 at that point. I started
Hmm.
working on this in like 2019. But that line, I was like, it's true because the Empire would invariably have to work for a lot of people. There
Hmm.
had to be a lot of problems with the Old Republic, which when you watch the Clone Wars series, you really get the sense that it was a really corrupt place too. And so people are never happy. Things are never perfect. There's always problems. And it's really just a question of how many problems you want to mitigate, you know? And so I took this perspective of somebody who was a firm believer in what they were doing, had their soul ripped apart by what they did, and now is just a broken individual and is telling, this is what broke me. And that's
Hmm.
the story. And it's like, I watched Ken Burns' Vietnam series, and that is like the motif that runs through that series. And it's these guys from North Vietnam who were believers, these guys from South Vietnam who were believers, these guys from like Kansas who were believers. And all of them realized that it was just rich people telling them to go fight each other so that they could make money. And they're all broken. They're all just broken individuals because of what they did. And like, I hated them so much, but I was terrified of them.
Hmm.
And it's like now I can't sleep in the dark anymore. And it's like that it's heartbreaking. It really is. And it happens time and time again, generation after generation after generation. And so in the Star Wars universe, we never focus on that. It's never that. It's always like these grand high adventures. And I love that. Don't get me wrong. I love escapism
Yes.
for the sake of escapism. But as a Star Wars fan, I really get a little bit tired of this. Everyone in the Empire is the absolute worst, and they're
Hmm.
all the worst people ever. And it's like, what if they were press ganged into service? Like,
Hmm.
so many people that were sailors in like the British Navy were just happened to be on the street at the wrong time, and a guy came with a truncheon and started beating them and dragged them away. And that's how it was.
Hmm.
So I wanted to tell a story like that in the Star Wars. And there's characters that you meet where some of them were their families were orphaned during the Clone Wars and they were raised in Republic housing, which became Imperial housing. And when they got to a certain age, it was like, guess what? You're in the
You're,
army now. And some of them were like, my family got arrested and I was given a choice. What do you want to do? And so those little people realities is what I wanted to talk about because me and you, we're not generals. We're
mhm.
never going to be generals. We're the people that end up going on the front line. And
Yeah.
I feel those stories often get ignored
Hmm.
in Star Wars. And it's very frustrating to me. And I was really excited when The Force Awakens came out and they had Finn as a I wanted to know Finn's backstory so bad. Like he's got his number. How did he
Yeah.
wind up? He was selected. He was trained from childhood, and it's like, tell us his story,
Story.
man.
Yep.
It's such an interesting story that they completely ignored. And
Hmm.
so that's those types of things were the things that were really motivating to me to tell a story like Mud. Little people that are just they're the ones that are suffering and I made them mud troopers because like as he says in the
Yeah.
begin like in the first 15 minutes you really get my philosophy of Star Wars.
Hmm.
It's like 15 minutes of me, this is how I feel about everything. And he explains like how mud troopers are the guys that just do the dirty work, stormtroopers are the face of the empire but we do the work. And like you don't want to be a stormtrooper, and they hate the
Mhm.
stormtroopers so much because the stormtroopers are just assholes because they're the face. And they're lower than stormtroopers. I wanted the lowest of the
The
low
low,
to be
yeah.
the center of this story, you know? Lower than dirt, they're mud troopers. That's
Hmm.
why I did it like that.
I
I
love it.
ranted now. I'm sorry, I was ranting.
No, you're great. You're the one. You're the one that it's your story. And so backing up a little bit to the idea of a audio drama or you know radio play, it's one of the things I've always told people why I like podcasts in general, whether it's a or audiobooks in general, is it's something to do that's outside watching TV or movies
Yeah.
because of the fact that watching a TV or a movie takes you're basically if you're watching it realistically, like if you're watching it to encompass the entire project, you have to sit there and pay attention and do nothing else. You can't be on
Hmm.
your phone, you can't be doing anything. And so audiobooks or audio dramas like this or radio plays, you can be in the car and I can be driving on the road. And all I really need to do
Yeah.
is pay attention to making sure I'm not getting in an accident, paying attention to road rules or all that stuff. But it's like, that's the wasted time if you think about it. The 20 minutes I drive from my home office to my work office is 20 minutes that I basically can listen to music, the same song I've listened to over and over and over again, or put something new and interesting on and get that extra bit of Star Wars story,
Yeah.
for an example, in there or a book or whatever, because that's 20 minutes of quote unquote, I hate to say wasted time, because it's also a good time just to do nothing, but like wasted time that I could actually encompass if I'm a nerd like myself and I want to get more of this stuff. Like this would be great as a TV show or a movie. It would be excellent as a TV show or a movie. But then again, I'd have to sit in front of a TV
Yeah.
and watch the whole thing
Listen, if
on
Disney
top of
Plus
all the other
calls
stuff.
me and wants
Yes.
to do it, we
Yes.
will. I'll sell out like that.
But I
But for
think that's
now,
it's also the same
100%.
thing. Like it could have been a comic book. You could have like
Yeah.
it could be a comic book story, but in the same sense, having this different form of media to take in you know bring into your mind this story is another way to take this. So now I can go home and I can read at night a Star Wars book of sorts or a comic book. I can then like watch an episode of Ahsoka, and then I could on the way to work the next morning listen to this and get three different timings and different you know my free time is taken up solely by Star Wars or Star Wars adjacent things. I could do that, and that's what's cool about something like this. The second thing is it's cool that it's yours, like it's your story, you wanted to tell this. The third one would be is that I love the fact that it's peripheral stuff. It's stuff that's on the borders of Star Wars where I've always said it's kind of funny that there's like Star Wars Rogue One. The Rogue One story was actually the most Star Warsy Star Wars movie. There's like
Yeah.
the actual most war in it out of all the Star Wars movies, and the Star Wars part was like a Star Wars story at the very
Yeah.
back. It wasn't even
Yeah.
like Star Wars because if you think about it, a lot of them have to do with government bodies or these other stuff. Like it
Yeah.
hasn't been the Rogue One where they're fighting on the actual ground and actually a war is actually breaking out in one of the most badass Darth Vader scenes of all time is in that
Oh,
movie too.
come
But like
on.
but
Absolutely.
but the idea that that's what I would want, like this is what you'd get out of a Mud79 TV show or a movie. You'd get this like whole like actual battles of people fighting each other more than just shoot a laser at someone and then have them go into warp speed and go like go
So
away.
this whole thing, like when you're talking about the TV show
Yeah.
comic book,
Yeah.
I had this was my if I ever got a chance to pitch a Star Wars
Yeah.
idea for a comic, this was what my pitch was going to be. I didn't plan on doing it as a radio play.
Mhm.
I just had the story, because there was that one Clone Wars series that was
Yeah.
just about the clones.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is sort of like that. It's just adjacent. But what happened during the pandemic was is I had some books that they were at the point where we were negotiating stuff and we are figuring out money, and then when pencils down happened they all imploded, and I had this big, you know what, screw it, I'm done, I'm not going to do comics anymore, it's over. I think I explained this with
Mhm.
Dead Romans too, like I
Yeah.
was done, I forgot about Dead Romans. But the Star Wars idea, like I can do the heavy lifting on this, and I've got a
Yeah.
lot of friends that are Star Wars fans that have no problem rolling tape for like 10, 15 minutes to get me audio. And that's all anybody needs. All I'm dependent on other people to do. I can do everything else by myself on my own schedule whenever I want to.
Mhm.
So that was why I did it as the audio drama, was to do it on my own and not be dependent on other people so much. But when you're talking about like it's the war aspect of Star Wars, There was a show that used to be on TV called Tour of Duty, which was this Vietnam show. Like, because my dad's military, so we lived in Belgium, and the only English channels were BBC and AFN,
Mhm.
Armed Forces Network. And so they were all over rah, rah, rah,
Yes.
USA, USA type content. Because this was the 80s. This was
Yeah.
the Cold War, man. We
Yeah.
lived there when Chernobyl happened. Like, it was very Cold War. So Tour of Duty was this show about the Vietnam War. And it had this like rotating cast. People would come in, people would go, people would die, they'd get replaced, da 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 da. And so that show really did help serve as sort of like an inspiration for Mud 79, which has like a very Vietnam War-esque
Hmm.
vibe. In fact, the main medic, voiced by Mike Walsh, the Silver Coin, and who did a bunch of comics for Star Wars and Marvel and stuff
Hmm.
over the year, including House of Vision. But he voices a medic named Corporal Husto, who is 100% inspired by the field medic from Tour of Duty. Like, and I'm not gonna lie, like the medic on Tour of Duty was like, he was a medical student who, big Vietnam War protester, got in trouble legally and wound up in the Nam. And he's this cynical but funny guy.
Hmm.
And so that's the character, and it's 100% inspired by that medic character. And I always told, like, I've photoshopped Walsh into the cast of Tour of Duty before, and I'm like, I'll be marvel at my photoshoppery skills. It's funny. Yeah, I love that show, and that vibe is really what I'm going
Hmm.
for with the whole Mud story. And I was very adamant that I didn't want Jedi in the story, which
Yes.
is interesting given when you listen to it, you'll be like, did you not want to? Because the way it flows. But I have said for years that the Inquisitors are my favorite thing that Star
Hmm.
Wars has added over the past. Like the new Star Wars things, the Inquisitors are my favorite because like I liked them in Rebels.
Hmm.
I think Rebels is the best Star Wars thing that's ever been done. I think it's better than Rogue One. I think it's better than Andor. Like I love Andor, but that doesn't mean that I think it's better than Rebels, because
Yeah.
Rebels has the vibe of Andor, the vibe of Rogue One, but it brings kids along for the ride. And I think from a writing perspective, that is so incredibly difficult, but they pull it off. Dave
Hmm.
Filoni, man, it's just it's so friggin' good, and I love it so much. But I completely talked myself into a corner and forget where I was going. The Inquisitors. So they
Yes.
introduced the Inquisitors in Rebels, is where they were first
Yes.
introduced. And then when you have Jedi Fallen Order, they really explain the dire nature of the Inquisitors. And so you think about it, it's like inquisitors are crackheads,
Hmm.
like, which is a very politically incorrect term, and I should have thought they've got real strong addiction issues.
Yes.
They've got very strong addiction issues, and they are addicted to fear, pain, and suffering, and they need it because the way that an inquisitor is created, they are a low-level Jedi, a Padawan, etc., and they get broken by the dark sword to the point that they can't live without feeding on fear, pain. They need to surround themselves with it. And the episode, like the episode 7 and 8 of season one, are my absolute favorites because those are the ones. First of all, you got Heather Antos and
Hmm.
Andrew Wheeler doing an amazing job as the two purge troopers who are like the henchmen of Inquisitor Tiberia, who is voiced by my buddy Tony, who is a phenomenal radio announcer who used to live in Toronto and she's now in Jamaica. But she voiced the Inquisitor, and we get this. The Inquisitor goes into this building because they're like, we're trying to find a hostage. We're trying to find a hostage that's been captured that is being ransomed for money because this guy comes from a really wealthy family, and revolutions and rebellions, it all comes down to money. So you need money. So we're gonna rescue this guy before he gets sold for money.
Hmm.
And the Inquisitor goes into a room, into a building, and it's like they want to rescue the hostage, but the Inquisitor goes in, and I paint it with the subtext. She's not going in to rescue anybody. She's not like that's not what
Yeah.
she's there to do. She is there to sow fear, to spread chaos, to spread destruction because she needs it. She needs the enemy to be afraid of her. And so she goes in I like in terms of like parts of the story that I am proud of, the audio production and the atmospherics on those two episodes are things I'm really, really proud of when I go back and listen to them
Mm-hmm.
because of the way I affected the audio. So after the Inquisitor's gone through this building and she and done what she does, you've got the narrator who comes in after,
Mm-hmm.
and he's describing how he goes, it wasn't like a butcher shop. It was like a butcher shop if they were playing with the product,
Mm-hmm.
and how the bodies are chopped apart and like you can see the streaks of blood that are like spread across bodies that have been pushed through walls, like etc. And then you can, as he's walking, you can hear like the lights flickering because they've been broken, like the
Yep.
in the background, and then the echoing of a scream coming from another floor. And then he's looking at something, he's not even sure what it is, and then someone grabs him. You're not supposed to be, you can't look at this. This is beyond your pay grade. Get out of here.
Yeah.
And it's just, I created horror as I could get with the audio. And I was, when I was putting it together, there's this guy who does Foley in Toronto. He's got an Instagram feed called Audio Studio, and he was a big fan of it, and he was like giving me pointers and tips for audio production. And when I was messaging him, and he goes, this is the thing you got to remember. He goes, there's sounds that your brain will like instinctively think bad, like bad,
Mm-hmm.
and deep rumbles that like tail off, that start high and go grrr, like that. He goes, your brain is programmed to think bad, 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 bad. I'm uncomfortable. And echoes that dissipate and reverse train echoes. So an echo like da, 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 but when
Mm-hmm.
you have it da, 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 like that comes in, things like that mess with your head. And so I was incorporating things like that into it because for somebody like us, he is delving into the world that the Inquisitor can't live without, and
Mm-hmm.
that is terror. So I've tried desperately to incorporate those things into it, and I'm super stoked with the way that all came together, you know?
I had in my notes here, like the sound effects were amazing. And that was before you even said anything about the sound effects, the things in the background, the noises and the music. And it's funny because I think about it, if you watch a horror movie in general, you mentioned the horror aspect of it or the thriller aspect of it too, is in this one part is that you watch a horror movie on mute, it probably won't be as scary as you think it is.
No.
It's actually one of those things. But if you were to like, if you were blind and like the horror movie was on, you probably would still be scared. And that's the thing about
Yeah.
it is the audio almost is more impactful in a horror movie or horror thing than the actual visuals that you see. And it could be the most disgusting and horrifying thing you've ever seen with the audio. I watched The Ritual from 2017 the other night, and I watched it while I was working. I have a TV here in the office that I had it on in the background. And I honestly stopped working too much because I was looking at the screen, not because I was interested in what was going on, but because the audio was making me feel uncomfortable. And I was like, okay, now I need
Yeah.
to watch what's going on because something's gonna happen here.
There's
But yeah.
that video game series High Score on Netflix,
Mm-hmm.
and they're talking to like one of the sound, like original sound engineers on like the Atari
Yep.
or Konami, from in their Japanese, and he had this line. He just says it in passing and throws it away, and it's about how so many video games initially didn't have sound effects when a character would move or shoot or do something, and then he goes, "Audio is confirmation," and
Yep.
that line sticks with me. So when I'm listening to it, there will be definite call signs if there needs to be a piece of audio there. There needs to be a piece of audio there. And I'm currently, because I'm working on season two right now, and season two flows much differently
Mm-hmm.
than season one does. Because season one has like they land, they have some heat, they get some time off, they get into some shenanigans, and then that is when after these shenanigans happen, they're really brought into, they really get a sense of, oh no, like that, they really get a sense of what it is
Yeah.
that they're dealing
Yeah.
with. And then it ends like horribly. It's got a absolutely horrible ending. And the season two it's the same scene. It's like the classic Rogue One New
Hmm.
Hope thing. Like it ends, the ending, like the very last scene where he's amid all this destruction and he sees all these ships coming and he's like, what is going on? Because he's got no clue what's happening. Then you start getting, oh, guess what? It's worse than you thought.
Hmm.
Things are way worse than what you thought they were. And so then now they're digging their way out. And the second season, you already know, like within the first 5 minutes of the second season, you know just how bad things are.
Yeah.
Now they're trying to dig their way out. And there's this there's this 5 episode stretch. It's actually, so the first season was 12 episodes. The second season's 20 episodes. And there's the first like 11 episodes, or no, the first 9 episodes are them digging their way to reestablish themselves. And then
Yes.
there's this 5 episode stretch where something that the military will do is they'll hold, like they call it like a dance, and there's like a boxing tournament, which was something that they did a lot in Vietnam, and they did it a
Hmm.
lot in, I'm the regimental champ. And it's like a way of building morale. And so there's a Terracotta tournament.
Hmm.
And there's this 5 episode stretch that involved this Terracotta tournament that is more than, it's a big propaganda piece for the Empire. And the audio in those 5 episodes is so dramatically different because there's not all this combat and action and fighting, etc. It's more like atmospheric and slowly paced. And it's, to me, the hardest part with those, because that's what I'm working on right now, is it feels like there's stretches where there's a lot of talking and just atmospheric background noise, rather
Hmm.
than like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, where I'm basically dictating the audio that's coming. You know what I mean? So I like, I hope that everyone buys into those episodes as much as the others, because I
It,
think that that is a really smart. I paint, like I lay out the finale of the series right there because I want to do a third season. I just got to find time to do it.
yes. Well, I mean, a lot of people, just so you know, anybody who's listening, this is obviously we're recording this now, and this episodes are dropping weekly now for season one. But
Yeah.
your second season comes out right on the heels of it, in a sense. So it's not
Yeah.
like you're waiting an entire year like a TV show or a
No,
movie, or
because
you're
I
actually going to be able to wait like what, 2 or 3 weeks, a month? Is that what it
no,
is?
it's like, it's not, there's no delay. It's
Oh,
gonna be
there isn't a
weekly.
delay. Okay.
There's no delay
Yeah.
because I did the first season back in like,
Yes.
so like in 2000, but I never was a fan of the read. I wasn't a fan of the read because initially, I don't know if you've watched Narcos Mexico,
I did not know.
but the beginning of Narcos Mexico has Scoot McNairy doing this. He's like, I'm gonna tell you a story, and I don't know how it ends. And like the way, like, and Scoot McNairy's voice is just, oh my God, it's incredible. But the voice is, I'm gonna tell you the story. This is what happened. Da 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 da. And the way he dictates it, it's very, it's very sad, but it works because there's a visual component behind it. And I tried to like do that. That's what I was trying to do. But what ended up happening was it just sounded really boring. Like it didn't sound as good as I wanted it to.
Yeah.
So I revoiced the whole first season, and then of course as I'm going, I'm building up a bigger audio
Mhm.
catalog. I'm finding new things. So when I revoiced it, I went in and then I like remastered and I thickened the tracks and I used different audio sound effects and I built bigger soundscapes and I used all the tools that I built while doing it, and then I just redid the whole first season. And so I told my producer Dila, who I often refer to in the post credits as the contemptible harpy, because I she's a huge Star Wars fan. Chopper
Mhm.
is her favorite Star Wars character, by the way, which is an
Yeah.
amazing like character note. But so the story, like I wanted to re-release. She goes, why don't you just finish the second season, then release the first season, and just have this one run where you do 32 straight weeks of content? And I'm like, that's a lot. She goes, no one does that. She's like, 32 straight weeks of an audio drama. So like it never happens. And she goes, and you will have so much momentum by the
Mhm.
time it ends. That's the way to do it. She goes, because you risk having people that they liked it, they finished it, but when it comes back, oh, I'm on to something new now. She's like,
Mhm.
no, they won't have anything new. You'll be part of that routine. So the final episode isn't even going to drop until January.
Mhm.
So when I fly to Comic Con, like San Diego on Wednesday, I'm going to be working on the plane and doing audio production while I'm flying. Like I just uploaded all of my audio files from my desktop to my laptop so that I
So
can
he could
work
have
on it
him.
while I'm there. So that's the amazing thing with like the way audio programs work now is like I just am importing all of the session files, so it's all right there. So I'm not missing a beat. The only thing that's different is it's not as ergonomic. I'm gonna be a little cramped
Yes.
when I'm working. So yeah.
Yes.
Other than that, we're
I feel the
aces.
same way. Like I used to my wife, when we used to edit these podcasts, my wife would be like watching TV. I had my headphones in as I would be recording, and then I'd go in the other room and I'd sit there and she'd be watching TV and I'd be doing it on my laptop. But using a laptop, like the touchpad and the keyboards, there's so
Yeah.
much and a smaller screen and all this other stuff. So now it's like, no, I'm gonna do it in my office. So this is
Yeah.
it. I'll get it done. I'll bang it out. It's fine. But like I gotta sit here and have two screens. I've got to have like my actual speakers in here, no headphones. I got to be like, so on and so forth. And now it's a lot easier. But yeah, but it's doable. Like I've recorded it.
Yeah.
We have a camp. I've recorded and then edited at camp because that's where I had the opportunity to do it. So it's possible, but it definitely is a
Yes.
lot easier when you have a desk
Yeah.
set up.
Oh my God. It's like and you set everything up so it's ergonomic and
Yeah,
the way you want things. And I like move the chair so I can rest my arm here so that
yeah.
I'm not leaning it down. I'm like, oh, yeah. Yeah. I would much rather produce there. I was recording like a lot of the episodes, like I set it up at home. So I would record everything at home, which
Mm-hmm.
was like sped up the process so much. And the first season I did piecemeal. Like I
Mm-hmm.
would do two episodes at a time, produce them, release them. This was I wrote the whole season. I got all the audio in for all the performers and then put it all together. And the frustrating thing was like I I had to kill some characters off
Mm-hmm.
because that's what happens.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes I would kill people off who were less reliable in terms of getting me their
Yes.
voices on time.
Yeah.
So their
I can
characters,
I can
yeah,
100% see that. That's
yeah.
not like it's not
But
even like
then some of them, like because you have to have those big emotional like touchstones about the people that are awesome need to die too, and that happens. And uh one of them who's like always gets me multiple takes, fantastic quality, they ended up dying. And I was like, oh, I wish I didn't kill them off, they're so good. They always kept everything done.
hey, it's a
Yeah,
Star Wars universe, it's a
yeah,
pop culture universe. They can come back
they could.
somehow.
They're yeah, the no
It's
force
also
ghosts.
it's also
Nope.
voice. So
Yeah,
like you could have
yes.
them come back. It's like, can you just tweak your voice a tiny bit and you'll be a new character in season 3? Don't worry.
Some people have played like multiple
Yeah,
characters.
see.
That's true. That has happened. But
Wow, that
the
that character sounds a lot like that other character from season 1, huh?
yeah, yeah. So like bit part characters, but
Yes.
I set it up in a way where they appear as a bit part in multiple points, but it's plausible for them to have been there so that when they come back,
Yeah.
it's easy for me to loop them in and becoming more of a main character. Like one of the, so in the story, when the mud troopers first land, there's just infantry, engineers, and all that stuff, and they're all separated. Everyone's sort of like infantry, they're an infantry battalion. But then the platoon makeup shifts, and
Mhm.
so they all get their designated roles within because they suddenly become an active combat unit. They weren't initially there. When they initially land on this planet, there's no there it's they're not there because they're in a combat role. They're there to hold land and secure land, and that they're to plant the flag. That's all they're doing. But war breaks out, a civil war starts on the planet's surface, insurgent activity, et cetera, and things get more and more dire. And so they break apart into specific roles,
Mhm.
scouts, heavy gunners, comms people, etc. They all have their roles within the platoons and within the squads. And then one of the main characters who's a scout, Mondahai, who becomes like the protagonist, like one of their closest friends, she was mentioned in the very first episode, but didn't even have any dialogue. She wasn't meant to be like a big main character, but then 3 episodes later, because his role changes and the people he's hanging out with more change, now she's a character who's talking all the time. And Cheyenne Garrick is the actress who plays her. She does a phenomenal. She actually appeared in a few commercials for Star Wars video games, including The Force Unleashed. She was in the video game, the commercial for that video game. So she does a fantastic job with the character she voices. And some of them are other like radio people that I knew. I wanted people who would have like who would do a great job
Yeah.
with getting me good audio. So those characters, because they're consistently and easy to keep around, I've tended to keep them around. Absolutely.
Yes, that makes
Yeah.
sense. It makes complete sense in that sense. But like, that's pretty funny. Killing off characters because they're not reliable in a sense. That's hey, you know what? It is what it is. But wasn't that like on Seinfeld? Wasn't it like George's the wife that or the fiance, George's fiance? They killed her off on the show because she was extremely hard to work with. Like she was like hard like on set that like this person is horrible to be on set, so they're like we got to write it into the show that she actually dies. We can't have her like break up with George and not because she can come back.
Yeah.
Like we have to like have her die so that she cannot come back because we do not want to work with her anymore. Like
In
it's actually it's pretty easy probably if you don't like someone either. If you got in a tiff with someone, you'd be like that's it, they're dying in
Boardwalk
episode
Empire, that's
7.
what they did. That's
Yes.
what they did with Boardwalk Empire. Is it Jimmy, the
Yeah.
guy? Like, yeah, they kill him off because of how awful he was on set and all the problems that he was causing. And so, and they don't just kill him. Steve Buscemi is the one who kills him too.
Yes.
Like, and that line, "I'm not looking for forgiveness." Boom, and he shoots him. I'm like, that was personal, Steve.
Yeah.
We all saw that. That was personal. There's
That's
actually
amazing.
one of the characters who dies at the end of the first season, and I feel like to me it's like it's been out for like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
It's not spoilers, but we're re-releasing it, so I don't want
Yeah.
to ruin anything for
Yes,
anybody.
exactly.
One of the characters, she dies in I think it's episode 10. Yeah, they die in episode 10. That was a rough one for me to write because she was so great as a character and her voicing was so good. But when they died, it was like it made sense for them to die
Mhm.
when they died. And I was like, oh, they got to die here. And that death really sets up a lot because you start to see the wear on the characters. They start to get because I was reading a lot of books about like people that were in Vietnam. Like there's this guy Nick Brockhausen who is like he was a Mac V SOG commando, and his book like has some really good narration and the stories that are in, and he's got like a lot of moments and passages where he's this fatalistic macho kind of guy, like who cares if I die? And then it's written in a way where he's definitely expressing that at the time he was this macho fatalistic guy. But then the next chapter, it's very evident the wear that it's having. And the reason that they get so eager to be in the field is because when they're in the field, that's the universe. That's all that matters
Mhm.
is what's there. They're not thinking about the consequences. They're not thinking about the other things. The only times that happens is when they're back at the base. And
Mhm.
that's when the weight of who's no longer there really hits them, you know? And he talks about how there was this song that they would sing for everybody who, when they died, they sang this song. I think it's called like Old Blue or something like that. And there's this one line that feels like a throwaway line, but you know it means a lot to the writer when he's writing it. And he goes, "We'd been singing Old Blue an awful lot that month." And it's just like, it's such a passing line. But if you just stop and think of the subtext about what's going on, it's that's probably one of the most meaningful lines that he wrote
Mhm.
in the whole book. And I want people, if they're listening to Mud79, I didn't write it to be an action movie. I wrote it to be almost like a very not poignant because it is a Star Wars thing. I don't feel calling it poignant is right. It's meant to be a very humanistic
Yes.
look at a very broad, big galaxy because it's all people at the end of this story. It's people, people, people. And he starts to develop this shade of gray. The second season, I think, really gets into it because that's where the conflict is really as broad as it gets. And I'm really hoping that like people follow through. And if you are a Star Wars fan and you like Rogue One, and Andor is the closest vibe because it's Andor deals with that. Like Andor they're working in a scrapyard, a town that exists as a scrapyard. That's their life, where you work on the farm or you work as a mechanic. And like he breaks down, like, that's all I have as options. So
yeah, there is.
Yeah.
Quickly, also, we've been diving into what's going on in the show a little bit too, or the audio drama and the podcast and so on. But like, so where does this fall into legality wise? Like, how do you get away? How does this work? For anybody, I'm sure people worry about this. I guarantee people who listen to Mud79 are asking this question. So I just didn't know if you have a sense on how this falls into a fan-made Star Wars story.
Well, so there's all kinds of fan-made videos and short films on Star Wars, and there's like the anime TIE fighter thing. There's Bucketheads, the short fan films about the stormtroopers. I've seen ones that are about the bounty hunters, and then there's people that take the cinematic tools from Battlefront, and then they make their short movies about it, and then they post it all online, and it gets like 6 million views.
Yeah,
and all of them are using Lucasfilm assets.
Yes,
all of them. They use Lucasfilm assets. They use all of the sound effects. They use the costuming, the visual references, everything, and nobody says a thing about it. And so my thought process was, I'm just gonna do an audio drama, and I don't use any of the music. Like, I don't use any of the music or anything like that. I use the sound effects, but most of the sound effects I'm using are assembled by me. Like, I'm making my own sound effects for it. I'm trying to build and anything that I'm using open source sound effects that you can buy to build, and I've bought hundreds of dollars of sound effects and audio files to build other things. So in terms of legality, I don't know, but I would be very frustrated if I got in trouble for doing this when I see people doing it already. There are Star Wars fan film contests that are sanctioned by Lucasfilm, by people that are industry professionals, and everyone lauds praise upon them constantly for taking assets and building something because they love it. And I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm not, and I make the very first line in the opening of the podcast, I don't own this.
Yes.
I have no ownership. I just love Star Wars. And the impetus came from, I was really depressed. And I love Star Wars, and I desperately have a Star Wars story to tell. And maybe that'll never get to happen. It might never happen. Could be the only Star Wars thing that I get to do. And I just wanted to do it. Like, I wanted to get it out there and just wanted to get it done. And I think as a Star Wars fan, and I've talked to multiple Star Wars podcasts about how, like, you're not doing anything negative. You're not dumping on the franchise. Like, you're celebrating your love for Star Wars. I will also say what's frustrating about doing the fan cast about it, because it's really just fan fiction and an audio drama. You're in a very weird spot because you'll have so many like dedicated Star Wars podcasts, fan sites, etc., that want nothing to do with you. They want nothing to do with you. They won't promote you in any way. They won't talk to you about it. They won't even engage you in a conversation. But at same sites, if it's a video thing, will like repeatedly play footage from it and talk about how great it is. And it's like, it feels like a constant uphill battle. And I don't understand what the difference between the two things is. I've got like 100 people all that are all just Star Wars fans that want to tell a cool story. It's
and you want people you want people to hear it. It's not this, you want people to know your Star Wars story.
I'm making no money. Like, I need everybody to know that, like,
you're losing money, honestly, because time is money too. How much money did you spend in time
So
just on producing this thing. Yeah.
it takes about an hour to do 4 minutes.
Mhm.
On average, an hour is 4 minutes of audio, and we have 30 to 40 plus minute episodes.
Mhm.
So you're talking hundreds of hours just on the production side, and then hundreds of hours having written it, and then getting the voicing, and then voicing it. And you're not like this, well, you could be making money on it. It's like, no, which no one, I haven't had any arguments. I've
Yes.
just had no replies from people.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
What's
crazy
weird
though.
too is like the fan film community too. They it's like they look. It's like, oh, I'm doing this like audio drama, and it's like, oh, well, must be nice. Oh, I do a video, and it's like, okay, I love your video. I've reposted it. Like I've talked about like how great this is to other people. Like I'm pumping your tires, man. Oh, that's because I'm really good. And it's like I don't get this like weird. Like we talked earlier about like
Yeah.
the floor at the Comic Con and people
Yeah.
who are thinking they're cool. This is the same thing. It's like an extension, and it's so weird to me. We're all nerds, guys.
Yes.
We love space wizards. Like we're not friggin' cool, okay? Just deal with it. Let's all be friends and help each other out, man.
That's it is weird though. It's just because it's not. Yeah, I don't know. We had Kai Patterson on the podcast. He did the recut of the Obi-Wan Kenobi TV show into a feature film thing, and the only thing he's ever had a problem with is he can't post that on YouTube or anything like that. But he's been able to allow it to keep it on certain servers, and people could download it for free. The only thing he says is make sure that the only people who, and this is only him just covering his own ass, is make sure you have a Disney Plus subscription before you download this and watch this, because you're still giving them the money. But
when I like whenever I don't ever badmouth anything Star Wars. Like I online anything, and people like dump on the Force Awakens. I think like the Force, which is, did you notice that weird divide with Rogue One and Force Awakens?
Yeah.
I legitimately have said that Force Awakens has some of the coolest ideas and concepts that Star Wars has ever seen. Do I think that it was perfect? No, but I don't think there's anything perfect in Star Wars at all. But like the ideas and the concepts and the themes and the things that are being brought up, I absolutely love. And I don't understand this weird, angry Star Wars fan thing. It's like, you don't own it. You don't own it. It's not yours. And
Well,
then it's not taking away the things that you already love either.
Yes.
Like, relax. If you hate it so much, write your own
Yes.
Star Wars audio drama and get blackballed by everybody when you try to
say, yeah, don't write a audio drama, write a movie of some sort, because you're not going to
do a fan film. Do a fan film about it, because everyone will love that. Okay.
What you need now is you need to get an animator and do a couple quick episodes. Just honestly, not even all the episodes, maybe like episode 1 of your show, so that like it's like one of those things that gets people hooked into it. Animate, even if it's crap. You know, did you ever watch Ricky Gervais's they did that with his podcast on HBO, like that kind of thing, where it's not even like amazing animation, just like clunky characters, almost like Star Trek or Star Wars meets like South Park, where it's like
I
just
wanted
like
to do a motion comic with it, actually. Do a motion comic with it on the first episode, but even that's like a few $1,000s. It's frustrating, like, but it's like the thing is my producer is very supportive of it, and she's a huge Star Wars fan too, and she always gets this, like, if people would just listen to the first episode, they would get hooked. Like, she goes, it's crack. She goes, when they listen to it, they'll get in. If they're a Star Wars fan, it's like they'll like it. The problem is just getting them to listen to it, and that it's like you're really competing with a million different things, and I can appreciate that.
I mean, here's the Joe Rogan talks for 4.5 freaking hours on his podcast. You can't think that someone can listen to a 50-minute episode of a audio drama. Like, come on, people.
Yeah.
Like I said, 20 minutes. It's 20. Yes. 20 minutes. It's 20 minutes. Like I said, 20 minutes to my work office to here and back. That's mostly an entire episode. Like, if you think about it, like, so like, why wouldn't I just do that on the way to work on a Monday or Tuesday, or whatever? Just go bam, back and forth. I could listen to the entire thing and encapsulate the entire episode in that drive. And so if you said there's 12 episodes, you said the first season, that's 12 weeks of your time, 1 day a week listening to this. It's not that hard. And the best part, like I said, it expands this already amazing universe with more stories that, let's be honest, are never going to be told by the actual people at Lucasfilm.
You know what I'll say, like, or everybody that I've talked to that's in the 501st that has listened to it,
Yes.
Like, and I have in the second season, I have a bunch of people from the five. All
That's
of the
awesome.
stormtroopers in the second season are voiced by members of the 501st. Every one of them. Because like one of my friends that I got to listen to it, who's in the 501st, he was like, "Oh, he's like, we're all like stoked for the second season, man. We can't wait for it to come out." And it's just, I just getting it in front of people.
Yeah.
I think that would be like awesome because it's been such a labor of, and not just from me, but from the cast members
Yeah.
that have been involved in the process the whole way through. And one of them who has worked on multiple Star Wars properties has told me very bluntly, she said that you got to understand how lucky you are that you're doing this Star Wars story and nobody is telling you what you can and can't do with it.
Cannot do. Yes, exactly.
And she's like, so when you're done, you'll have crafted this wonderful little pocket of the universe that invariably and inevitably people will discover, and it'll be pure. And she's like, and
Yes.
that is an amazing thing. And you need to, she's like, don't ever let yourself feel defeated. Be proud of what you've done with it. And I'm like,
Mhm.
that's so kind. That's so nice. Yeah.
It's true though that you have like because you things are untouchable in a sense. Like you don't want to touch things yourself because of the fact that
Yeah.
you don't want Luke Skywalker and all that. You don't want the
No.
Skywalker legacy. You don't want that the Jedi part of it you mentioned. But like it was funny as Mark Bernardin, who's been on the podcast too, talked about. He wrote a black, white, and red Darth Vader comic book, and he
Yeah.
was
My
like he was
Adam
trying.
Gorham did the art for that.
Oh yep,
Yeah.
yep. And he was trying to like talk about which characters he can use and cannot use and things. And he said I had to try to not read too far into it because the most obscure things that I wanted to use in the story I was not allowed to touch. And I'm like, why am I not allowed to touch? Are they gonna do something with this? Like trying to figure out not like negatively that he can't use it, but
Yeah.
more along the lines of, oh, this makes my ears perk up a little bit. Like, what are they gonna do with this random character that I wanted to
Yeah.
use?
Jackson the rabbit? No, you can't touch him. Nope.
Ooh, is there gonna
No
be a feature
Jackson.
film?
Yeah. Why is that?
And I wanted to say,
Yeah.
I want to go on and on and on, but like one of the things I wanted to say, the best part, I think, on top of it actually being a well written and well performed audio drama, is the intros to every episode. It totally makes me feel like I'm watching an episode of Rebels or Clone Wars or any of those ones. And you get in the very beginning, it says previously on, in that kind of like voice. It's so amazing because it's like one of the things I've always had a complaint about, and I'm actually going to throw this complaint out there, not remembering whether or not you do a recap at the beginning of Dead Romans or not, but is
There's no
when you go
recap in Dead
see,
Romans.
see,
Sorry. I'm
but
sorry.
yeah, but like one of those things that I've always said is that if you do end up like myself, I have like 15 podcasts that I try my best to
Yeah.
get in and out, is that there's a possibility that I will wait, episode. By the way, this is released June 1st, not June 8th. Do you remember that
Yeah.
debacle?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
The there's a possibility I didn't actually start listening to like June 15th. And so there's 3 episodes in it, but then maybe I won't
Yeah.
start listening to it again for 3 weeks later because other things take precedence or whatever. And trying to forever what happened between episodes 3 and episode 4 is sometimes hard. So having this whole like last time on kind of helps with that thing. And one of the things I've always said is that
And
they
we
didn't
tried
even
to mimic Clone Wars
Yes,
too.
yes, in that sense. Like one of the things I've complained the most about,
Yeah.
I am a huge fan of the Ninja Turtles, and the last Ronin series was amazing, and it's continuously being amazing. But the idea that they released a comic book every 3 months and there wasn't some sort of recap at the beginning of it, I'm like, you have 3 months in between the last time that I probably read this book and
Yeah.
now, and you're expecting me to immediately remember what happened on the final page. It's forced me to go back and read that book again. And it's, which I said that's not a bad thing, but like with all the books and things that I want to or need to read, it takes too much time. So that's one thing. Dead Romans came out monthly, so it's not like it's horrible in that sense. It is only five or six issues,
Yeah.
and so like you don't have to worry about it being like this long thing. But yeah, the previously on or last time we
Yeah.
saw these characters is so good, and it sounds just like you'd watch. Like if you just close your
Yeah.
eyes, you'd think a Saturday morning cartoon was on TV of sorts. It's
We
awesome.
got the guy who did the voice. His name's Adam. He did the voice of one of the Imperial officers in the first season, and he's a VO guy by trade. Like that's what he does. He's another
Okay.
guy that I know in radio. Adam Herdman is his name, and he's got amazing pipes. I kill for those pipes. But like we played him the Clone Wars, and I was like, this is what I want, and I could see this like. Really? This is what you want? This is like he goes, you've got this really serious vibe, and then this voice is like almost hokey. I'm like, yeah, but as a Star Wars fan, it works. And he's like, well, I don't know. I'm like, trust me, it
Yes.
works. And so one of my friends who doesn't even really like Mud, he's like, goes, I'm not a big fan of it because like I don't feel like your voice is excited as it should be. And I'm like, and then he wrote me, was I love the intro for it. It's so great. And I'm like, of course you do. Of course that's what you love. And it's yeah. So that was done 100% on purpose. But I've got to run, man. I got to get to work right now.
Yes, I mean I've got to the other one too. But the other thing is like I want to quickly is that you can feel the wipe on the screen. You know, like when you talk about like you can feel that, and like he said that I can just like sit there and like I just feel like the world around me goes, and like I'm like, oh my god, we're into the world of Star Wars. But yes,
we played the beginning for like because I do the audio production of the play, but Rob Johnson does the final pass of the production to put it all together and post it. So we played like this is what it's gotta be like. So that's 100% on purpose.
That's
and
awesome.
Again, don't own it, just love it as
Yes.
a fan. For anybody listening, I have no ownership, no rights, nothing. We're just fans, all right?
Fanning out. And this is your the ultimate fan thing is to do that. And honestly, one of those things that people should say to people at Lucasfilm and George Lucas and all those people who have created this thing is you should be an honor to have things like this created for it, because it just shows that you how much respect and love you have for it, and you're keeping within the respect of Star Wars lore by doing this.
I think I'm pretty sure that there is like a great deal of love for the fans, and they love that fans love it so much. I really think that the fan community can be a lot more toxic to the property than the people that are in charge of it.
Yeah.
And unless I start making and producing my own film to post and release and all that, I don't foresee any real legal issues because I've been very clear. Like, we're just fans, man.
You're also in Canada. No one really.
Yeah.
You're up in Canada. You're like,
we are up here.
It's too far north for them to worry about. No. Okay, quickly. So let's finish this up. So the current season is airing or on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those things right now.
Yeah.
For Mud79. Second season starts right after the last episode on August 24th is the second season. I think we have information up on capesandtights.com as well as Curious. This is by Curious Cast. This is on Curious Cast.
Curious Cast. Yeah. They're just hosting it.
Yes, hosting it, but I'm just saying, but they're the ones hosting it for them. So I wanted to give them a shout out too. But Fearless_Fred on Instagram and Twitter is your stuff. Dead Romans is getting close to the end here, isn't it?
Yes. It's funny. Dead Romans ends the same week season 2 of Mud Romans begins.
There you go.
What's going on?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's awesome. Check that out. And I will say, just the last point, Nick would be a great artist for a comic book version of this podcast. I'll tell you right now.
We might be working on something, but I can't say anything. But I will say that Nick is a huge fan. Like, he loves it a lot. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. But thanks a lot, Fred. Have fun at San Diego. Hope a ton of people get comic books signed by you and hang out with you and stuff like that. So I'm hoping that you have a fun job over in San Diego. And thank you for coming on and chatting Mud79 on the podcast.
Well, thank you, man. I'm always eager to come back whenever you need me. And I promise to be in a place with better internet.
I think it's funny. We've had a problem with internet here for the past couple of weeks. My wife is like, wants to call the internet company and be like, one of 700 people that probably call them. But exactly. So they're going to fix it right away. I'm sure they're going to. But I appreciate it again. And again, Fearless_Fred on social media. Find Fred on all of his stuff. Buy Dead Romans. It's amazing. As well as listen to Mud79 wherever podcasts are found. Thanks a lot, man.
Thank you.